So if you're following along in the bowl season fantasy guide, we're going to go ahead and talk about the Myrtle Beach Bowl first. In Conway, South Carolina, North Texas, taking on Appalachian State. And on paper, this looks like a big mismatch. Vegas believes that as well. The Mountaineers opening up a 20.5-point favorite. A lot of things leaning towards the Appalachian State side for obvious reasons. But let's get a little bit into the matchup and talk about it from a fantasy perspective as well. When you look at North Texas, offense hasn't been their problem. They have scored at least 27 points. Well, they've scored at least 20 points in all but one game. That was a 49-17 loss at UTSA. And then they only scored 21 against Charlotte earlier in the year. But other than that, they have scored at least 27 points in every other game. When you look at Appalachian State, they had that early season loss on the road to Marshall, 17-7. There wasn't a lot of offense in that game. And then you look at two late season losses on the road at Coastal Carolina, and then they lost to Louisiana at home as well. Quality losses, though, when you look at the Appalachian State schedule. I know Marshall has that loss to Rice, but for the most part, Marshall has looked solid all season. Coastal Carolina, I've said all along, and since the beginning of the season, they look like the most improved team in the FBS, and I think that's pretty much held true all season long. And then they got a matchup against Louisiana this weekend, who faced Coastal Carolina in the Sun Belt Conference Championship. So two of their three losses, as a matter of fact, all three of their losses, Appalachian States, were against teams that are competing for a conference championship. Obviously Marshall taking on UAB, and Coastal Carolina and Louisiana are playing in the Sun Belt Conference Championship. So on paper, it does favor Appalachian State, but let's look at from a fantasy perspective what we're looking at. And this is why I say the matchup on paper and everywhere just leans Appalachian State, because Jalen Darden, receiver for North Texas, he's gone ahead and declared for the NFL draft. So he will not be playing in the bowl game. And he has been obviously he has been their offense from a fantasy perspective. I mean, he is the guy that you have leaned on all season, that have carried many of you guys through the season long leagues. When you look at the quarterback position from a fantasy perspective, Jason Bean started out the season and it went to Austin Aune. Jason Bean, Austin Aune. It seems to be on Jason Bean right now. I don't trust that one guy is going to be able to stay in this game and play the full 60 minutes. I think Appalachian State is going to handle business. I wouldn't be surprised if both Bean and Aune make an appearance in this game. And a lot of it really is going to have to do with how effective the starter is going to be, which right now that may be a little bit more of a 50-50 proposition. I think the reason why you like a team like Appalachian State and some of these early bowl season matchups is that there's not much of a gap between the regular season and the postseason this year. We are going right into bowl season. I mean, some of these teams played within 2 weeks, just 2 weeks ago. So there's not a lot of prep time. They're going into these matchups as if it's just a regular season game with the prep time that's involved. And what that means for North Texas is they're going into a game week and all of a sudden their best offensive player is no longer around. So where's North Texas going to go for offense? They could do one of two things. They could actually, take a guy like Deontay Simpson, maybe Austin Ogunmakin, maybe even a player like Roderick Burns, and give him more of a bigger role in the passing game. The one thing North Texas has is depth at running back. DeAndre Torrey, Oscar Attaway, Trey Siggers. They could start this matchup possibly with a quarterback like Jason Bean and try to go run heavy, a lot of read pass options. That could be an option to maybe throw Appalachian State off a little bit. I would think that maybe North Texas goes that route. I think if they just go back and try to get into their regular passing routine, I think the Appalachian State would have a field day. And if Appalachian State gets out in front and races ahead by a couple of scores, they're just going to pin their ears back. And then I think you're looking at a long day for that North Texas offense. But really, for me, it's hard to really jump on any fantasy assets on North Texas just because of the unknown at quarterback on whether or not we're going to get rotation. We know we're going to get rotation in the North Texas backfield, but they will ride the hot hand, whether or not that may be, Torrey's probably the likely guy to emerge as their leading rusher, but I wouldn't count out Attaway, who was their best running back at the beginning of the season. And you've got Siggers in there as well. And like I mentioned, the receivers that I threw out, maybe you work in, Jason Myrtle at tight end. Maybe he gets a little bit more work now that Jalen Darden is gone. But there are so many questions on the North Texas side. Whereas you look on Appalachian State side, the only question you really have is who are the healthy running backs? We know we've got Zach Thomas at quarterback, 19 touchdown passes on the year. He's got another 2 rushing as well. So he's got 21 touchdowns on the season. We've got, first of all, let's start with who's probably out, and that's Dietrich Harrington, right? Dietrich Harrington, I think he went out in the middle of November. We haven't seen him since. There's no signs of him coming back, something we monitor. But like I said, with the quick turnaround on these games, I don't feel confident that Harrington's going to be able to make an appearance in this matchup. Marcus Williams Jr. has faded as of late as well. Cameron Peoples was mostly used down the stretch as their main back. He's got 146 rush attempts on the year, but Nate Noel, don't count him out. He's come on really late. He got a lot of work in the season with Peoples, with Harrington, and with Williams getting nicked up. Nate Noel came in during the year, got a lot of work, 79 carries, 484 yards. Did a lot of work in that last game as well. Would not surprise me if we see him heavily involved in this matchup now that it's a bowl game as well. From a receiver standpoint, you've got Thomas Hennigan and Malik Williams. Those are the 2 guys that caught at least 40 passes in that Appalachian State offense. So if they have to throw the ball or if they choose to throw the ball, I feel like we know what we're getting. We've got consistency with Appalachian State, and the depth in the backfield really has made it irrelevant as far as who's lining up back there. It's all about, for you DFS guys and for you guys going into this draft, I think I'm going to go ahead and jump on board with the players that are healthy going into the matchup. So what that means is, with Marcus Williams' injury earlier in the year, we haven't seen him utilized like we did earlier in the season. I think right now, if you're looking from a running back perspective, it's Cameron Peoples and Nate Noel right now where you have a lot more confidence. Zach Thomas is obviously a little, you're going to jump on him before you jump on one of the North Texas quarterbacks as well. And then it's a little bit of roulette. If you happen to hit on the North Texas receiver that they try to utilize, like they utilize Jalen Darden, then you're on to something. But I have a lot of doubt in that. There's not a guy, in my opinion, that can really make up for Darden's absence. And so I think you see, if I had to take a receiver right now, you're looking at Deontay Simpson as the next best receiver with 25 receptions this year. He would figure to be maybe the guy to kind of take over a leading role in this game, considering that there's just not a lot of prep time going into the bowl game. So with that being said, let's kind of go into what I feel. I said what I feel is going to kind of play out. My picks for this game. I think it's really tough to take North Texas under any circumstances. I think it's a no-brainer that I'm obviously going to take Appalachian State straight up. But when you look at the point spread right now, 20.5, I just think for a team like Appalachian State, a defense that is pretty solid, I think even though North Texas has been able to put points up on the board, when you look at their schedule, there really hasn't been any defenses like Appalachian State on their schedule to date. So I like Appalachian State. I like Appalachian State big. I don't know where North Texas is going to be able to find offense in this game. And for me, the 65.5 is a little doubtful because this could be more of a one-way matchup. This could be one of those 42-14 type matchups. And then all of a sudden you start kind of, looking for that score late in the game. If I had to make a pick on the total, I would probably lean under in this one just because I'm just not sure how many points North Texas is going to be able to give us. If you go over, I think what you're looking at in this matchup is that you need Appalachian State to race out to a really big lead. I think you need them to go up by four touchdowns late, and then maybe they work some of those second teamers in there in the bowl game just to give them, some bowl experience, and just to say they play in a bowl game. Maybe this game gets out of hand. They put some second teamers in late. North Texas is able to drive for a couple of late scores that I can see pushing the game over. I think if it remains more of a 2 to 3 touchdown game for most of the way, obviously you're going to be sweating out the point spread at that point as an Appalachian State player, as someone that has an Appalachian State play. But then again, you might not be pushing that total as well. So that's how I kind of see it playing out. I look for a one-way win right here, blowout win, Appalachian State big. If I had to pick against the total, I would probably stay under. And in my opinion, this is going to be more of like a 42, 45, 14 game. And that's it for the Myrtle Beach Bowl. First bowl game of the year.